Okay, welcome everyone. Today is June 8th, and we're here once again to get a weather update with Dr. Jeff Andresen from MSU. So Jeff, drought continues to be the story, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it today. So looking forward to your report.
Well, and there's quite a bit to talk about and with the report this today on the 8th, and I've got three images up here. There have been a lot of changes and actually a lot meteorologically going on here over the last several days. But in the upper left hand, I'll start up here. This is a forecasted jet stream conditions for tomorrow morning. And what you can see here in terms of the feature, all this orange, this upside down U feature, a big upper air ridge parked across the northern Great Plains into the upper Midwest. And under those ridges, you almost always have sinking motion subsidence and warmer than normal conditions and usually dry. And that's pretty much says it all. But if you look really closely, there's another sort of the opposite of this, a U-shaped feature here, a little bit of a trough. And this is a piece of a weather system that was out in the southwestern US that has migrated and drifted up towards the Great Lakes. And it's a big, well, it made a huge difference. One is that it opened up the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes region. And on the upper right-hand side here, just move to the right, this map is showing a variable called precipitable water. All it is basically is how much water vapor is in the atmosphere at a given time. Remember that we've got to have water vapor, of course, to have precipitation. So the more of this precipitable water you have, theoretically, the more precip you can have. Well, as you probably can appreciate, we've been really low on water vapor and precipitable water here for much of the last couple of months. But with this weather system here in the upper left, this weak troughing feature that's moved, we shifted our winds out of the south. And so what you're looking at here is transport of just tons and tons and tons of water vapor from the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see the little wind barbs here. These are all southerly winds up through the lower Mississippi Valley on up into the Great Lakes region. That came in, the transition and the beginning of this moisture feed started overnight Sunday and into Monday morning. And of course, for some people, yesterday we saw the beginning results of this, and that was showers and thunderstorms yesterday afternoon and evening. We're going to continue to see the same thing because the pattern basically is stuck on hold right now. So for the next several days, we're going to have almost a repeat of the same kind of conditions. We're in a tropical air mass, very somewhat unusual. This is actually something more akin to what you would observe in the southeastern U.S. We'll call it our version of Georgia weather here for this week, but almost a daily chance of showers and thunderstorms, especially in the afternoon and evening. Because while we have all sorts of water vapor, what we don't have is some type of a weather disturbance like a frontal boundary or area of low pressure that would pick up that moisture, lift it, and cause it to precipitate out as rain or in the cold season as snow. So what we've got to work with is convection and uneven heating of the Earth's surface and the air bubbling, and that's what we're going to see here again, almost on a daily basis. So what's this third figure here? Well, there are ultimately changes suggested by the forecast guidance, and down here on the bottom, these are forecast conditions out a week to next Tuesday, the 15th, and there are some significant differences in this. And the major one is that ridge that had been really more over the upper Midwest has shifted westward. It's actually gotten stronger almost too. It's hard to believe, but very, very warm and dry for portions of the Great Plains and into the Rockies because of that. But note here, more importantly for us, there's been the formation of a troughing feature, which puts Michigan back under northwesterly flow aloft. And we've seen that periodically for a lot of the last few months. Very high amplitude, big ridges and troughs here, another feature that we've seen a lot of. But what it means is that we probably will see some noticeable cooling in our temperatures. It also probably means, unfortunately, that the drier than normal weather that we've been stuck with for so long will certainly be with us next week and maybe longer than that. Looking in the rearview mirror here, just briefly, where have we been? Well, as most people probably appreciate, we had a very, very warm week with that ridge parked over the region, much above normal temperatures. And our departure for the week ranged from 4 degrees Fahrenheit across the southern border, Indiana and Ohio, to as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in far northern parts of the state. So way, way above. We racked up an awful lot of degree day units and heat during the week. It goes without saying, though, much, much warmer than normal. On the right-hand side, just as, or even more importantly for some, our precipitation totals. Note that these are only through yesterday morning, through Monday, 8 o'clock. And I'll show you another image regarding that here just a second. But with the exception of the southeastern corner of lower Michigan, where they picked up a very nice, very, very beneficial rain. Some cases more than half an inch fell late last week. You can see that those, again, dark blue and green colors down here in the southeast. Also portions of central and western upper Michigan picked up precipitation last week as well. Contrast that with much of northern and western lower Michigan, less than 1/10 of an inch, in some cases virtually dry. But the bottom line, yet another drier than normal week, and they continue to rack up here number-wise. And it's, of course, a terrible time of the year for that to happen. But many parts, most of the state did remain drier than normal, unfortunately, for the previous week. Our degree day totals, just looking at a map here, again, we racked up a lot of GDDs last weekend, and relative to normal, because of the warmer than normal week, most areas here are a couple of calendar days or a few calendar days ahead of where they typically are at this time. We're a little bit further along now than we were a week ago, though. So almost all the state, and you can remember probably a couple maps in the not too recent past where northern parts of the state were behind by a couple days. Well, now everybody is ahead because of the warmer than normal week. Wanted to share here a daily sequence. This is off of our EnviroWeather Meso network. This is our station, or one of the stations we have at the Hort Center here on campus at MSU, because it tells an interesting story of sort of where we've been over the last 7 days. This one goes up through this morning. So this is, again, Tuesday morning here. And you can see these daily temperature curves. The red here is air temperature. The blue is dew point temperature. And so we've got pretty much 7 full daily cycles. So Sunday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday, you can see going backwards in time. And what happened during the past week, it's a nice way of sort of looking at this. But the reason I wanted to share this was because we've had some significant changes. The first one was a noticeable warm up that we had during the middle of last week, where our daytime temperatures went from the low and mid 70s quickly up into the 80s. In some cases, we went over 90 degrees here starting last Friday and then into the weekend. But just as even more interestingly, look at the dew point temperatures here, because the air mass that we had, at least initially late last week and over the weekend, was a continental air mass from really from the southwestern U.S., from the deserts. If you've been watching the news or watching the weather, you've heard a lot about high temperature records and heat advisories, all sorts of problems. This air mass was a piece of that air mass, again, that was here for a few days. Look at the dew point temperature, how that responded. It falls off, meaning that there's less water vapor in the air, lower relative humidities. And note that even here during Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the air temperature didn't even at night, didn't even get close. So we never had, well, we had very little or dew at all. Just unusually dry for this time of the year. And with the data down below here are solar radiation in red. These are hourly values. And then the brown are reference potential evapotranspiration, which, remember, that's the atmospheric demand for water from a reference surface based on the meteorological conditions. And what it all combined for very sunny days, very, very warm temperatures or hot temperatures, low humidities, so low water vapor in the air, and relatively strong winds. All of those combined, those are the 4 variables for potential evapotranspiration. They're all maximized. And we saw daily values late last week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in the ballpark of 0.25 to 0.3 inches. Now, that may not sound like much, but climatologically, that's the top end. That's as high as we ever see in Michigan, certainly for a 3-day period. And so we had many areas, again, in the state that had over 3/4 of reference PET in just a 3-day period. That's as up in the top couple percent. So very, very strong atmospheric demand. Note that yesterday, because again, this is East Lansing, but note because of the cloudiness, we had a lot less solar radiation. And of course, all the PET values went down as well. But, and also note here, finally, last thing with this, beginning on late Sunday, we had a surge, that moisture, that second image that I showed you on the title slide here, with all sorts of that Gulf of Mexico moisture. It made it here into Michigan late on Sunday and continued on to Monday. And you can see that in this trace as the dew point temperature gradually gets closer and closer and climbs. It went from, you can see the near 50 degrees to this current value in the upper 60s to near 70. So all sorts of water vapor added, increases in humidity. And again, another, so we went from a continental desert derived air mass middle late last week to the current tropical air mass. So again, a little bit different for Michigan. We're usually, well, don't see those things, those transitions too often, but we have over the last week. Now with that moisture, we did see showers and thunderstorms pop up yesterday afternoon and evening, but and it's going to be the same case for the next couple of days. But unfortunately, this is not what's really needed given the drought. And the reason is, even though we have tons and tons of water out there and water vapor out there, we don't have a focusing mechanism. Again, some type of a weather system that would lead to more uniform, widespread precipitation. It's basically just going to be isolated to scattered convection, mainly mid-afternoon to early evening. And you can see that clearly here. This is from the a radar-derived estimate of precipitation totals for the last approximately 24 hours. And you look at this, and I was just telling folks that I was very, very lucky last night. I had a shower here in Hazlet, and I had over an inch of rain in 20 minutes. But just a couple miles away, there was little or none. And you can see that pattern here. The blues here are over an inch, the dark blue color here, but most areas had much less than that. Most areas had a few hundredths or no precipitation. So this is not what's needed. There are going to be some very, very lucky people that do pick up precipitation over the next few days, but unfortunately just not enough. So soil moisture here, generally relative to last week, with the exception of the southeastern corner of the state, where again they picked up over half an inch. Most areas saw declines, and that was true not just in Michigan, but in the region as a whole. Historically, if we look at the period from the beginning of the calendar year, beginning of January through the end of May, just to give you some perspective, these are rankings, and the browns are all dry, the greens are all wet. You can see a pretty obvious pattern here in the region. Northern parts of the Midwest have been unusually dry, and it gets wetter than normal as you move south, especially towards the Ohio Valley and south into the lower Mississippi Valley. But in Michigan, with these 5-month totals here, you can see they're unfortunately, most of them are top 10. 129 is the driest year, and you can see the southwestern lower, this climate division down here in the southwest at 126. So that would be the 4th driest on record. That's company we don't want to be keeping. Obviously, it's very, very, very historically, climatologically very, very unusual to see an early part of the year that dry. So it is something, again, climatologically significant. And finally, U.S. Drought Monitor, the most recent one. This is really reflects conditions last week. Still just under 80% of the state in some form of abnormal dryness, including again about 6 or 7% in the Southwest in the D2 or severe drought category. Probably we'll see, unfortunately, some changes in this given where we are and given what the forecast outlook appears to be telling us. So where are we headed? I mentioned we're in a very, very sort of a stable, unchanging type of situation here for the next several days. This morning, the weather system that I talked about at the beginning here, that upper air, a little bit of trough with this deep feed of tropical moisture, is as far north as Michigan, but most of the precipitation with that, as we have seen so many times this year, is probably going to fall to our south and locations to our south and west over the Ohio Valley and the lower Mississippi Valley. There is a frontal boundary up here to our north that does serve as a boundary to some cooler and drier air, another Canadian air mass. That will probably play a role as we move into the late weekend. As I loop through here, this is tomorrow morning. You can see more of the same. So we're dealing with here for most of us, especially across the southern half of the state, scattered showers and thunderstorms developing by midday, certainly by the middle of the afternoon, when we have the warmest, most unstable conditions, the time of the day, and continuing into the early evening or middle evening, and then dissipating overnight. And then we'll set the stage. That's going to be the forecast here today, Tuesday. We'll see the same thing on Wednesday, Thursday, probably to some extent even on Friday. So we're looking at a multiple day chance of this. If you've lived in the Southeast, this is a kind of pretty typical scenario for the late summer across places like, again, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, where they just have afternoon thunderstorms or a chance almost on a daily basis. This is our version of it. And it actually is. It's displaced just further north and west than it goes. But the bottom line is, for many needing rain, you might be lucky, but most areas will not get enough, or the coverage will not be enough to make a huge difference. So again, I think the over underlying messages here, a chance, but a small chance for most areas to see significant changes. Here's the map on Thursday morning, and you can see finally that this frontal boundary is pushing a little bit to the south and west. It's a backdoor cold front, like we've seen a couple of these actually this spring and early summer. So we might see our temperatures drop off a little bit. That's the other part of this. We will be looking at abnormally warm conditions for the next several days. Highs generally in the mid, maybe a few upper 80s, lower 80s in the northern part of the state. Our low temperatures only in the mid and upper 60s because of those really high dew points, all that moisture in the air. And we're going to be stuck there for the next several days, probably then cooling a few degrees by the end of the weekend and into early next week, as this air mass to our north, we get a little bit of an influence from that, but probably also drier, less humid by the end of the weekend and early next week. In terms of total precipitation, you can see it's just like a shotgun blast here. It's all over the place. Highest probabilities, the greatest aerial coverage, and the highest totals will likely be across southern parts of the state, and then decrease as you go north into Michigan. Once again, less than 1/4 of an inch over large portions of the state. That's obviously not what's needed, but there will be some lucky areas that do pick up over 1/2 inch, in some cases even more than that. But it isn't, even though we're dealing with a lot of chances for precipitation, it's just not going to be enough over the large areas to make a difference. And in terms of potential evapotranspiration, we're of course unlikely to see the types of values that we saw late last week and into the weekend, but they're still higher than normal. These are weekly totals through next Tuesday, and you can see most areas we're talking about 1800s to 2200s per day on average. So still above normal, but not as extreme as what it was here again over the weekend. Into the medium range, we talked about at the beginning, some changes coming. The upper air forecast here for the 13th through the 17th, it looks just like that map we saw on the title slide. Ridge out over the western part of the U.S., trough over the east, Michigan sort of in between. And as a result of that, you can see our temperatures, we're sort of on the near to a little bit above normal, but on a gradient on the border between the two. The big message in the medium range guidance, in my opinion, and it's not good, but look at the precipitation. Northwesterly flow aloft, again, sort of in between these two areas. That's not conducive for one, we're going to miss the moisture feed out of the Gulf of Mexico with that type of pattern, and there probably will just be fewer weather disturbances along it. So you can see down in the lower right, the forecast for the 6 to 10 day strongly suggests below normal precipitation totals. Last thing that's needed. Matter of fact, the confidence on this, they've got us up almost into 60%. That's about as high as you'll see a medium range forecast go for the precipitation category, one way or the other. But again, this looks dry. And then I'm showing the 8 to 14 day because there's essentially a continuation of the two. A little bit of a de-amplification of the jet stream, but still drier than normal, right over the eastern Corn Belt and up in the Great Lakes. So I think that's the major theme. Unfortunately, we'll hope for a change after that, but it looks like we're stuck, especially once we get to the end of the weekend, we're stuck with drier than normal conditions for at least a week and maybe longer than that. So summarizing here, basically very summer-like, warm and humid for the next several days with the daily showers and thunderstorms, especially across the southern part of the state, but look for high variability from place to place. Then finally, fair and a little bit drier and cooler by the end of the weekend into early next week. And as you just saw for the medium range, drier than normal, the returning, just fewer weather systems than is normally the case. And with that, I'll wrap it up, Kevin, and hand it back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. I noticed one thing, especially this morning, that humidity level is pretty darn high. And one of the models we have that was actually developed by some researchers at the University of Wisconsin for one of our diseases called dollar spot. I've been getting alerts every day, I think, recently for, hey, it's time for dollar spot activity. And it's certainly with that humidity, I think we're going to see, especially golf course turfing, lawn height turf, humidity, and these afternoon showers are going to change conditions a little bit from the bone dry. I don't know if we're going to recover slowly. It sounds like maybe, but other things to look for, we're going to see increased disease activity in addition to all the weeds that are out there loving life.
What a change though from last. Actually, one more thing, just for the turf community. One thing we just don't we see very often, but it showed up in that dew point map here. Again, this the one down below here is the potential of evapotranspiration. Note that at night here over the weekend, the air was so dry that the air temperature did not approach the dew point temperature. And this is in East Lansing, but it happened in many places. So little or no dew, which is not very common at this time of the year, especially as we go into the later part of the summer. But this is what I wanted to show, that I rarely ever see the brown down here. It suggests that there was evaporation occurring overnight. It was dry enough, in other words, even without solar radiation, there was still evaporation taking place. That's something we rarely see in Michigan. That, of course, if we were out in Reno or in Tucson, yes, that's a common issue, but not here in Michigan. And it actually showed up on some of these series, which is very unusual. And now, as you say, now we've got the opposite with point temperatures up around 70, which is really high, even for this time of the year. So one extreme to the other.
Yeah, that's amazing when you think about, you were talking about those ET rates last week, over a 3-day stretch approaching, what do you say, 3/4 of an inch or something like that? I mean, that's
for 3 days. Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable for this.
It is for Michigan. Again, we're not the arid desert Southwest. That's a very respectable number, though, even for them. But for us, it's just it's at the very top, and we don't see it that often. And again, given how little water is in the landscape right now, it's bad timing too.
And I've noticed that with a lot of lawns, just driving around, that even people that are irrigating, they just haven't been meeting demand. You're seeing a lot of hot spots and just dry on the edges, and that's just going to be reality until we really get some more moisture. I think it's just going to be one of those, especially it's early June, like we had talked about before. This is usually July, August when we see this type of stress. So exactly,
the timing is just unusual, and we have the peak solar still to come, the peak PET to come as well. That's July and August for us in Michigan. So it's going to be a challenging one, and given that there's so little water in reserve in many places, this is just going to be a continuing. Maybe it'll change, but the odds are this challenge is going to continue with us for the next couple months.
Going to be a fun summer.
Interesting, anyway.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I appreciate it. We'll see you back here next week.